Singapore is the smallest country in Southeast Asia, but it's also the richest. How did they manage that? Especially when the country is tiny, has the smallest population, and doesn't have any natural resources, not even its own clean water. I believe that when Singapore first gained independence, most of its land was slums, and it used to be called a country with no future. I'm interested in learning about Singapore because we just had an election here at home, so it got me thinking. There should be something new hope. That's why I want to know how a country that once had nothing, like Singapore, managed to become so prosperous. So I decided to make this, Singapore, the trilogy, 3 packed episodes for you to watch and enjoy. In this first part, it's all about how Singapore was built from the ground up by its leader, Lee Kuan Yew. Let me tell you, he was determined, resilient, and courageous enough to create a future for his country. He managed to build Singapore into what we see today. Let's see how he did it. Support information about Singapore without any bias. And for this first episode, you can access it via this QR code. Or if you want to support the Psy Money Monster channel, it's super easy. Leave a comment to chat, hit like, share, or save it to watch later. But what I'd love most is for you to... Yes, please hit the subscribe button for me. Just 1 click per person is enough. No need to click again. Thank you. Singapore was expelled from Malaysia. That was the big headline on August 9th, 1965. On that day, Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew had to announce this news to the people of Singapore through the national television station. While Lee Kuan Yew was making the announcement, he couldn't even finish his sentence. His voice was trembling a lot, and yes, he cried. Lee Kuan Yew once said that the moment when the agreement to expel Singapore from Malaysia was signed was an extremely painful time. Listen to his voice. Lee Kuan Yew was so affected that he actually cried when he announced this news to the people of Singapore. That's because Singapore's separation from Malaysia meant that Singapore was cut off from food resources, 90% of which it relied on Malaysia for, and also from clean water resources, 50% of which came from Malaysia. This made the news that Lee Kuan Yew had just announced, that Singapore would no longer exist under the same arrangement, so impactful. From Malaysia and was now born as the new Republic of Singapore, it meant that this small island, which had no resources of its own and no military of its own, was now cut off from its own future. At that time, Singapore was basically just a port. There was nothing it could call its own. There was no agriculture, no minerals, no industry, no oil. In fact, 75% of the country's land was slums, and the population? The country had less than 2 million people. Most families lived in slums and shacks and had to use public toilets, lining up for a long time to use public restrooms that weren't even clean. And if you asked about education, more than half the population couldn't even read. On top of that, there were constant and intense racial conflicts, especially between Malays and Chinese. They were always fighting. If the fighting led to deaths, it was normal to see bodies left in the gutters or by the roadside. That was Singapore in 1965. It wasn't even really a country yet, just a failed state that even Malaysia didn't want. But Lee Kuan Yew had to build something here. After Lee Kuan Yew made the announcement and everything was settled, 6 weeks later, he disappeared. He locked himself away in Changi Cottage, unable to eat or sleep, to the point where doctors had to prescribe him sedatives. Even Parliament at that time was in a state of... No one really knew what to do next. But those 6 weeks were the only time Lee Kuan Yew ever stopped. After that, he sprang into action. The moment he walked out of that room, the first thing on his mind was diplomacy. Singapore had no resources, no military, no allies. The very first thing Singapore had to do was figure out how to get the world to recognize it as a country, no matter what it took. And Lee Kuan Yew actually succeeded. It took him just 1 month to push for Singapore to be officially recognized as a country, joining the United Nations within that month. Lee Kuan Yew believed that the best way to build a nation was through capital. So he was willing to risk everything to secure funding to build the country. The very first sum of money that Lee Kuan Yew managed to get actually came from a World Bank loan. This loan was used to the infrastructure of Singapore, because for a country to develop well, its infrastructure has to be solid first. So the money borrowed from the World Bank was used to build ports, power plants, and industrial estates. After the infrastructure was in place, Lee Kuan Yew started to think that if he wanted money to keep flowing in and circulating, the country's economy and finances had to be strong. At that time, what Lee Kuan Yew was thinking was, Singapore's economy and finances were basically in ruins. But what Lee Kuan Yew did was invite a Dutch economist named Albert Wincengus to come and give straightforward advice on what Singapore should do if it wanted to attract foreign investment. Albert gave his recommendation, saying that the first thing to do was to forget about nationalism. Forget about ideology for now. If you want foreign capital to flow into Singapore, you need to do these 5 things. First, keep taxes low. Second, make sure there's no corruption in the country. Third, maintain political stability. The country must be steady. Fourth, keep the country clean. Clean it up from top to bottom. No slums, no garbage, no riots. Fifth, start by building modern factories, and don't forget to invest in training your local workforce so they have the specific skills needed to work with those factories and foreign companies. If you can do all this, foreign companies will come to you on their own. And it worked. A wide variety of major international corporations flocked to Singapore, like Texas Instruments, Hewlett-Packard, and General Electric. Once the foreign capital finally flowed into the country, what Lee Kuan Yew did next was to turn his attention back to the country itself. He realized that Singapore wasn't actually lacking in resources. The most important and valuable resource Singapore had was its people and their hard work. If you expect your people to be high-quality resources and you want good results from them, right? Then you have to make sure they have a good quality of life. Because we can only expect good results from our citizens if they're not living a quality life, if they're not happy. Lee looked around Singapore, and the first pain point, the first problem he saw, was that people were still living in slums. That had to be fixed first. So Lee took the funds he had raised and used them to build homes for the people. This was called the Housing Development Board, or HDB, which is known as the nation's public housing. Then Lee went on to manage. He moved hundreds of thousands of Singaporeans from poor living conditions into HDB apartments. And the public housing built by the Singaporean government isn't like what we might think, like, oh, government housing must be bad. In Singapore, it's actually really good, very well managed, and the housing itself is excellent. Even the middle class in Singapore live in HDBs because, well, they have running water and plumbing. This was the first time that Singapore made its people feel a sense of having a stake in the country. But it wasn't free housing. At first, the process of moving in wasn't expensive, but there were strict regulations. People living in HDBs had to contribute a full 20% of their monthly income to the CPF, or Central Provident Fund. This fund was specifically established to be used for retirement, and this fund became one of the primary and major sources of capital for investing in the development and construction of HDBs. In addition, the fund would be strategically invested in the country's infrastructure and other vital investments as well. But one thing Lee Kuan Yew absolutely would not use this money for was direct government handouts, welfare, or subsidies. According to Lee Kuan Yew's philosophy, he believed in not simply giving things away to the people. Everyone had to learn to stand on their own 2 feet and work together to build a stronger nation. You couldn't just wait around for handouts. Once people had good housing, Lee Kuan Yew then turned his attention to education. He started to change the direction of the education system. At that time, the country was being built up, with infrastructure being developed. So the direction of education in Singapore began to shift toward producing engineers and architects to help build the nation. He also pushed for the idea that not only men should have access to education, but women should too, so that the country would have more smart people. Lee Kuan Yew even said something along the lines of, "Only smart women are the ones who should have children. As for those who are poor, not smart, and uneducated, they should just sterilize themselves." He even made a promise to the people of Singapore that even the poorest person, if they are determined to study and work hard, can change their social class. You can rise up and become wealthy. That was Lee Kuan Yew's way of building a high-quality Singaporean population. After that, Lee Kuan Yew looked back and realized there was a weakness in Singapore that he needed to fix. As I mentioned before, Singapore had to rely on Malaysia for 50% of its water supply. So Lee Kuan Yew addressed this weakness and turned it into a strength. Singapore spent decades building reservoirs, recycling plants, and desalination plants. They even managed to turn the seawater surrounding the island into clean, usable water. Today, as a result, Singapore is a country that can fully rely on its own water supply. On top of that, it's been widely recognized and celebrated as a global case study for water security and resilience. This means Singapore can be confident that it won't be held hostage by neighboring countries turning the water tap on or off. The next thing Lee Kuan Yew did was systematically tackle the issue of corruption, which is the biggest obstacle holding back progress no matter where it might be found. When Lee Kuan Yew set out to eliminate corruption, he didn't just come in guns blazing like, "Hey, we're gonna crack down on corruption right now." What he did first was double the salaries of ministers and civil servants in the country. This was to make sure that people working for the government had enough to live on, enough money, so they wouldn't need to resort to corruption. After that, he launched the Corrupt Practices Investigation Bureau, or CPIB. Anyone who engaged in corruption or bribery would go to jail. There was even a case at that time. The Minister for National Development, EP.1, was caught accepting a $1 million bribe from a private company. The CPIB immediately took action, no matter how high up the person was. They brought him to court. But before the trial, EP.1 took his own life by overdosing on medication. When Lee Kuan Yew found out about this, his reaction in the media was clear. He was cold, completely unemotional, and Lee Kuan Yew even said he did wrong. He accepted a bribe. I can't help him. No one is above the law, not even a loyal minister. We have to be willing to make sacrifices, because if we allow an exception even once, others will follow. The fight against corruption must be thorough. What Lee Kuan Yew did next was he established the military and national security for the country. Singapore is a country that, without its own military, cannot defend itself. Even though at that time, Indonesia and Malaysia, that's neighboring countries, weren't in conflict, there was no way to know if one day they might become enemies again. So in 1967, Lee Kuan Yew established national service, requiring every young man in Singapore to serve the nation for 2 years. At that time, Israel acted as an advisor in the founding of the Singapore Armed Forces. What Lee Kuan Yew did, he admired Israel and brought them in as advisors because Israel is also a small country, but was able to defeat its much larger Arab neighbors with a smaller but highly disciplined military. As a result, by 1971, Singapore had 16,000 combat-ready soldiers. Lee Kuan Yew's rule for being in the military was very simple and straightforward. If you can't defend yourself, no one else will do it for you. And in that same year, Lee Kuan Yew also succeeded in building his own alliances. Because on August 8, 1967, Singapore was one of the founding nations of ASEAN, along with Thailand, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Indonesia, 5 countries that officially became allies. The next major problem that Lee Kuan Yew tackled was a crucial one. Internal conflict had to be eliminated. This was because Singapore was home to people of many different ethnicities, including Chinese and Indian. And all these different ethnic groups were constantly clashing with each other, which eventually led to riots. Lee Kuan Yew did not want any riots in the country. So what he did was announce that the state would officially recognize 4 languages: Chinese, Malay, Tamil, and English. Every child would have the freedom to go to school and learn their own mother tongue. But everyone also had to learn English, so that English would become a common ground for everyone to live together. There was also religious regulation. It didn't matter what religion anyone followed, but if someone tried to spread a religion in a way that could cause violence or division, that was forbidden. And the next thing, after handling internal conflicts, making sure people had a good quality of life, education, a military, security, and allies, and after ending divisions, another important matter was to beautify the country. It was time for Singapore to manage its own image and make it beautiful. So Lee Kuan Yew announced a campaign, the Garden City Project, which meant planting trees all along Singapore's highways. They cleaned up the rivers, got rid of wastewater, and created public parks in the city. Because turning the country green, making it full of trees, is like a universal language to announce to the world, hey, Singapore isn't a slum anymore. And by the early 1970s, in just a few years, Singapore had everything: a stable nation, a military, and a strong economy. They had machinery and beautiful scenery. All of this came together as a single, simple message sent out to the world: Singapore. It's a developed country because everything has already been built and completed. What needs to be done next is to protect and maintain it as it is by creating extremely strict regulations. The rules in Singapore are really tough. If you traffic drugs, it's the death penalty by hanging. If you chew gum and spit it out, or litter, or even spit on the street, it's illegal. Fines range from hundreds to several thousand Singapore dollars. And if anyone tries to oppose or attack the system, they can be beaten, bankrupted, or detained without trial. If the media reports anything that damages the country, it gets censored. Lee Kuan Yew's philosophy is that the government decides what's right, without caring about what the people think. This is why many people say that Singapore's prosperity has come at the cost of its people's freedom, and that's not an exaggeration. But no matter what methods were used, you have to admit one thing: Lee Kuan Yew's gamble in building Singapore paid off beautifully, all within a single generation. The Singapore dream that he promised became a reality. Ordinary people and the poor could truly get ahead. Singaporeans really did get to own their own homes through the HDD program. Education became the new ladder for the working class. If you worked hard and didn't slip up, the system wouldn't abandon you, and that was true. In 1969, Singapore launched the Port of Singapore, becoming a crossroads between Asian exports and Western markets. Now, it is one of the most important ports in the world. In 1972, Singapore Airlines was launched, becoming a global symbol of luxury and efficiency. In 1981, Changi Airport was opened, which has been recognized as the best airport in the world. Lee Kuan Yew turned Singapore from a failed state into a country that is a center of both intellect and finance. Lee Kuan Yew himself admitted that, yes, he did intervene in the lives and daily routines of the people, but if he hadn't done that, we wouldn't be standing where we are today. And eventually, the end of Lee Kuan Yew's journey arrived. In March 2015, at the age of 91, Lee Kuan Yew passed away. And at his funeral, nearly 2 million Singaporeans lined up in the rain to pay their respects and say goodbye to the dictator who built both the nation and hope for them. That's the end of this episode, but there are 3 episodes about Singapore, 2 more to go. Some people, after listening to this episode, might feel, wow, Singapore is so enviable. Their country looks rich, prosperous, and seems to have endless opportunities for wealth. Of course, and if you ask me personally, if I had to choose between living in a wealthy country from the start and having the kind of complete freedom we have today, honestly, I'm not really that envious. But the reason I have to tell you about another episode is because what Lee Kuan Yew built, what everyone calls so great, almost miraculous, actually turned into a system that's almost too good. It's so good that even the locals themselves feel trapped and can't break free. you really can avoid it. And it makes it so much harder for the new generation of Singaporeans to break through. That's the price you have to pay for building Singapore's economic miracle. Stay tuned for episode 2. What should I call it? Maybe the dark side of the Singapore miracle? Or dreamed big but couldn't reach it? Well, I'll decide on the title later. For now, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next episode. Thank you.